I don't think that the actor Mads Mikkelsen needs any introduction with my audience. We know him, or rather know of him. We love him. He's in the canon of what we might call literally me actors, standing alongside other greats like Ryan Gosling, Robert Pattinson, Christian Bale, Vincent Gallo, Joaquin Phoenix, Alain Delon, and Robert De Niro. Well, early Robert De Niro, unless you think that The Intern, Las Vegas, and Dirty Grandpa are literally me movies. If that's the case, then okay.
You're a professor?
Yeah, why? You looking for some extra credit?
He's the sort of actor who always puts on a great performance, whether it's in a lower budget Danish drama like The Hunt, or in a big Hollywood picture, like Star Wars, Marvel, James Bond, or most recently, Indiana Jones. Side note, I am not looking forward to the new Indy, but I'm glad that Mads was probably paid pretty well. After watching this video, you might be more inclined to watch some more of Mads Mikkelsen's other work, or maybe you just want to take a deep dive into European cinema. However, you might run into a slight problem. The streaming services you use don't show the films that you want to watch in your region. But have no fear, fellow cinephiles. Wow, that sounded really lame. Because there's Atlas VPN. With this VPN, you can easily access content from other regions, so your access to world cinema will expand by a lot. I just want to say thank you to Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video. You guys are keeping the Literally Me series alive. Atlas VPN is a virtual private network that encrypts your data and hides your location, protecting your data from governments and corporations and all those guys. It's supported on iOS, Android, Mac, Windows, and Linux, so you can protect all your devices. If you don't like it, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. And right now, Atlas VPN is running their summer deal. It means you can get it for just $1.83 a month, plus 3 months extra before the summer deal expires. Time's running out, so get your deal by clicking the link in the video description below. With over 750 servers in a multitude of countries, the possibilities for watching online content and movies, especially Literally Me and Sigma movies, is enormous. Did I tell you that there's a major discount right now in which you only spend $1.83 a month? I mean, come on, that's less than you spend on Pedialyte and trashy food after you get hungover. So click the link in the description to take advantage of this offer. Think of all the cool movies that you're going to be able to watch. So, in this video, I'm looking back on some of my favorite films in which Mikkelsen starred. I already covered one of my favorites, Pusher 2 with Blood on My Hands, the Refn-directed crime drama, in a previous video. So, if you want to hear me gush about that film, go check that video out. I'll be focusing mainly on his Danish movies, as they don't often get the attention that some of his bigger films, like say Rogue One, typically get. If, in this video, any of these movies sound fun or interesting or cool, I encourage you to go watch them and let me know what you think, whether it's on Twitter or Letterboxd. Alright, I'll start off with probably his most famous of these movies, the Academy Award-winning film by Thomas Vinterberg, Another Round, aka Droog. Just a word of warning though, there will be spoilers for this film. Do humans have a blood alcohol level that's too low? Do we function better if we maintain a back level of 0.05%? This is the hypothesis, conceived by Norwegian psychiatrist Finn Skoderud, that the characters of Another Round put to the test. At the center of Another Round are 4 high school teachers: Martin, a history teacher, Tommy, the gym coach, Nikolai, the psychology teacher, and Peter, the music teacher. They're all middle-aged, past their primes, and they find themselves leading boring or disappointing lives. This is especially true of Martin, who acts sullen and shut off from the world. He doesn't care enough about his job to teach his students, and so he can't connect with the students at all, which causes the students' parents to have growing concerns that their kids will fail their exams. Maybe he's just introverted, but I think he's also depressed. And so, at Nikolai's 40th birthday party, Nikolai proposes Skoderud's theory to his friends and colleagues. Initially, it's just to humor themselves as they drink around the table, but the idea strikes a chord with all of them. They all want a change of pace. They want to do something that will excite them. So, like a lot of drunks and would-be drunks, they intellectualize their descent into alcoholism. They gather together to conduct a study. The test subjects? Themselves, of course. They start off with maintaining a back of 0.05% during working hours, while documenting the effects on how they work, act, and feel. They feel the effects almost instantaneously. Tommy is a better coach. Peter pulls a much better performance out of the choir, and Martin finally connects with his students, becoming the teacher they needed him to be. All around, they're more energetic, more full of life, and much more empathetic to the students. But they don't stop there. They figure that since everybody's body is different, they should each maintain back levels that feel optimal to their own selves. Again, good results. If you thought they would end it there, well, you're wrong. Oh no. They've been edging themselves on the booze this whole time, maintaining a nice buzz, but now they want to get absolutely blasted. Their drink of choice for getting super drunk? My personal favorite cocktail, the Sazerac. If you don't know what a Sazerac is, it's the classic cocktail of New Orleans. A lot of places have their own spin on the drink, so it's going to taste slightly different depending upon who makes it. But here's my recipe for it. First, put a whiskey glass in the freezer. Next, muddle a sugar cube with some water in a mixing glass. Then add in 3 dashes of Peychaud's bitters and 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. Now, you mix in a shot of rye whiskey. I really like mixtures myself. Now give it a stir. Now, take out the chilled whiskey glass, and then spray a little absinthe on the inner sides of the glass. If you don't have a spray bottle, pour just a little in and coat the inside with it. Put a big ice cube in your glass, and now it's time to strain your cocktail into it. To finish it all off, cut off a lemon peel, rub the rim of the glass, and drink. It's really, and I mean really strong, so I tend to stay away from drinking it because I don't hate my liver. Suffice to say, the Sazeracs do the trick in getting the men blackout. They have the night of their lives, acting like teenagers despite being middle-aged. They make fools of themselves in the grocery store and cause chaos at the bar. But, you know, sometimes you've got to live a little. However, with the blackout comes the hangover, and the film takes a dark, melancholy turn. The repressed issues between Martin and his wife surface, having been repressed for God knows how long, which leads to them separating. Tommy descends into unmanageable drunkenness, and we realize that he's using booze as a crutch. To him, his life is a disappointment, and he has nothing to live for. The alcohol gives him temporary respite, but how long can that realistically last? The director, Thomas Vinterberg, guides us into the darkness as the men have to finally face reality. They're no longer riding the high of the booze buzz. Their worst inner selves come to the forefront of their psyches, and they must deal with it or not deal with it. In Thomas's case, he decides to take his own life and end his suffering. But just when we think that the movie is going to end on a downer ending, when we think that Vinterberg wants to ensure that no one leaving the cinema has dry eyes, he uplifts us by bringing the film full circle and recontextualizes drinking to be an act of celebration. Martin and his friends leave the funeral to find the students celebrating the end of their exams. It's a celebration of youth and life, of endless possibility. It contrasts the somber mood of the funeral. Even at their nadir, they can see that nothing is impossible. Their lives aren't over, and they still have time to make the best of it. The drinking, partying students reinvigorate their spirits. Every end is a new beginning, and celebrations are in order. They join the students in the revelry, which leads to arguably the best scene in the film. Martin, during the festivities, sits down on a bench, thinking about Tommy. He also thinks about how, in the previous scene, his wife texted him, telling him that she misses him. Their relationship is not lost. Tommy would be happy. In an act of pure joy, joy in spite of his grief, Martin breaks out in dance. Jazz ballet, that is. It's something to behold. Side note, Mads Mikkelsen was a professional dancer, and it shows. Vinterberg ends the film with a freeze frame of Martin in the air. He's jumping into the water, but by freezing time, we get the feeling that he's only going to soar higher and higher and higher, never to fall. While working on this video, I decided that I should put this theory to the test. Will maintaining a BAC of 0.05% improve my performance at work? Here are my findings. I noticed that I edited better. The slight buzz got me over the existential dread I usually encounter when I see my editing timelines. I maintained this for days, and those days were great, but I felt like there was something more. So I started to drink more, and soon enough I was no longer buzzed, but I was on the verge of being drunk. To be honest about myself, I'm a sleepy drunk. So when I should have been editing, I was, well, you know, sleeping. It also didn't help at all with my daily workouts. I was losing all the gains I desperately needed. At my lowest point, I considered eating my vomit to get my gains back. That's when I knew I hit rock bottom. I needed to stop, but I couldn't. Not all at once. I just hoped that as I weaned myself off of booze, that nobody at work would discover my secret.
Hey Kino, you got a problem? Bottle's not empty.
The quote that opens the film is one by Kierkegaard. What is youth? A dream. What is love? The content of the dream. I think that at its core, Another Round isn't about drinking. It's about finding a love for life. Martin is so shut in, and he keeps every bad thought and feeling repressed. He hates the fact that he never sees his wife because they work opposite shifts. He's not content with his job as a high school English teacher, knowing that he could have been successful higher up in academia. But rather than express these feelings, he bottles them up, letting them fester inside him. It depresses him and turns him into somebody no one wants to be around. He feels like an automaton, going about his daily routines and performing whatever tasks he needs to perform. But he's not really there. Effectively, he's dead inside. Why isn't he open? Is he afraid that his real self is something bad? Something others won't like? Is he anxious of changes that might occur in his life should he open up? Well, we all know that alcohol lowers inhibitions. It's called liquid courage for a reason. What we witness over the course of the film is Martin becoming the person he really is, or he ought to be. Upon realizing that his buzz self is actually quite popular, he increases his alcohol intake, but he also gains self-confidence. Now, finally, he can be honest with his wife, and he can tell her how he feels distant from her, which is something that's incredibly scary to say to a spouse. It causes them to separate, sure, but it's framed as a necessary death for rebirth, as they come back together, and we can assume that they're a stronger couple from here on out. He could have lived his whole life in an unhappy marriage, too afraid to address the obvious problems, but his transformation turned him into a man unafraid to endure the temporary pain in order to achieve lasting happiness. Now, Tommy's path is a darker one. His character arc serves as the cautionary tale of the movie, as he becomes a complete alcoholic, which most likely intensifies his depression, leading him to a watery grave. But it's made more sad, because we know how Tommy feels, but we also see that he couldn't see just how much everyone loved him. Rather than open himself up to everyone, his abuse of alcohol blinded him to the love given to him. As Tommy sinks, Martin soars. The film is way more affecting when you know the context in which Vinterberg made it. 4 days into filming the movie, he received a call that would destroy anyone. His ex-wife had been driving his daughter down to Paris to meet with some friends when they were hit by a car. The other driver was distracted by their cell phone. His daughter died on the spot. I honestly don't know how he managed to film the movie, but the film's concept of finding joy in life despite grief is not a platitude. It's as honest a message as one could convey in these circumstances. A noble one, in fact.
We ended up making this movie for her, as her monument. Ida, this is a miracle that just happened.
Before I end this segment on another round, I want to look at a small but affecting side plot in the film, the relationship between Peter and Sebastian. A smart kid with terrible test anxiety. Sebastian failed the previous year's exams as a result of his anxiety, and so he's redoing his last year of secondary school. This time, the pressure is worse, as he dreads the possibility of repeating the year a third time. He can't handle the anxiety. Peter offers him an unorthodox remedy. Guess what it is? Alcohol. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. Peter encourages him, knowing that Sebastian is smart enough to pass, and he also accompanies him to his oral exams, bringing with him a glass of, water. Sebastian has a rocky start, but after a few sips from the bottle, talks with ease. His little arc serves as a microcosm for Martin's, and highlights how it's not just old guys who live in a state of anxiety, it's everyone. Is alcohol the cure to this anxiety? I don't think so, and the film doesn't really take a definitive stance on this question, but rather it highlights to us all the different ways that we drink. To celebrate, to get rid of stress, to drown our sorrows, to open ourselves up, to commune with one another, and to compete in drinking games. If there's one definitive takeaway about drinking from another round, it's that our world leaders sure do like to get shit-faced. How much damage can one lie do? How willing are people to turn on their own and initiate a witch hunt? Does evidence in a highly emotional case even matter? After the release of his hit Dogma 95 film Festin, also known as The Celebration, a film in which a patriarch's son declares to the family on his mom's birthday that his dad molested him as a child psychiatrist approached Vinterberg. The psychiatrist brought case files and the like to show Vinterberg that although child abuse is more common than anyone would like, there are also many cases of innocent people being accused of this evil. The director knew that there was a film in this, but he wasn't able to make it until over a decade later. He teamed up with screenwriter and director Tobias Lindholm, and together they wrote The Hunt as a counterpoint or complement to Festin. I've seen some talk online about how it's based on a single case, whether it's a case in Norway or Brazil. But the filmmakers claim that, for legal reasons, it's not based on any one case, even if it shares similarities to some. Vinterberg also didn't want The Hunt to be a case movie, but a piece of fiction that transcends what one might find in a newspaper article. He wanted The Hunt to be more of a metaphor for society at large, rather than a story about something that actually happened. I think he accomplished that quite well. In this film, Mads Mikkelsen plays as Lucas, a laid-off high school teacher who now works in a kindergarten. He's a lonely man who's fighting for custody of his son and trying to rebuild his life after what seemed to be a nasty divorce. He's a pillar of his small community, beloved by everyone there. He hunts with them, drinks with them, and hell, he grew up with them. What we see at the outset of the film is an ideal community. It's tight-knit and filled with love. But this peace is not long-lasting. Clara, the daughter of Lucas's best friend Theo, is a student at the kindergarten. Lucas sees her and treats her as if she's his own daughter, but she has different feelings for him. She develops romantic feelings towards Lucas, which he quickly shuts down, telling her to give the heart she made to a boy her age. This obviously hurts her a lot, so she tells the principal that she saw Lucas's private parts and describes his parts based on pornographic images her brother had showed her earlier. It starts off as a hush-hush internal matter, but the wildfire spreads. The principal informs everyone in the kindergarten as well as the parents that this happened, noting that she firmly believes it to be true. The parents are then told to watch out if their kids have any symptoms of past abuse, such as nightmares. Sure enough, many of the children have nightmares, and then they all accuse Lucas of being inappropriate with almost every child under his care. The police get involved, but not before this lie has snowballed out of control, turning him from a cherished member of the town into a social pariah. He can't talk to anyone, he can't reason with anyone, he can't even go grocery shopping. Okay, so I'm going to get into some spoilers for this one right now, so if you haven't seen the film yet, skip ahead to the next chapter. Just know that The Hunt is an absolute masterful film that will get your blood boiling. It's not an easy watch, and it deals with very delicate subject matter. It's also technically a Christmas movie, but I would highly advise against putting this on for your family on Christmas morning. Alright, back to it. The film tracks the spread and transformation of the lie. Clara initially lied because she was simply mad at Lucas for rightfully rejecting her. Considering how young she is, there's no way she could conceive of the consequences of her actions. The problem is that the adults immediately believe her and don't try to get Lucas's side of the story. Greta, the principal, informs the parents that she believes it to be true, so everyone in the community defers to her authority on the matter and considers it a fact, despite no real investigation having happened at that time. The lie then enlarges, but what makes it extra tragic, in my opinion, is that Clara tells the truth fairly early on in the movie. She confesses to her mom that she told a lie and that she had just said something stupid, but her mom tells her that it was true. What has been set in motion is now in motion and cannot easily be stopped. The social persecution outweighs any legal problems Lucas has. He gets beaten up when he goes out for groceries. He's cut off from most of his friends. Someone murders his dog, and the lie threatens to tear apart his family. Even when the stories the kids tell turn out all to be false, as they all describe the crimes as happening in his basement when he doesn't even have a basement, the persecution doesn't stop. His reintroduction into society is long and shaky at best. It's his best friend Theo, who's conflicted during the entire film, who realizes that Lucas is innocent, and his extending of the olive branch marks the beginning of the healing. But will the stigma ever go away? The film leaves us with a terrifying image. An unknown man during the hunt shoots at Lucas. The bullet hits the tree and Lucas falls down. Before we know it, the man is gone. Is this just Lucas being paranoid, and will he ever grow out of this paranoia? Or does someone in the hunt still believe him to be a criminal? Will this label ever disappear? He might have gone back to a sort of normal life, but there's a tension there. Things aren't what they used to be. It's like if a vase breaks and you glue it back together, you can still see the cracks. The film leaves us with difficult questions to ask ourselves. We need to protect our children. They're vulnerable, and it is our duty to make sure that harm does not come to them. But are we willing to destroy an innocent man's life in order to make ourselves feel more secure? A case like this is tricky at best, as it's instantly emotional. It's so hard to separate our instinctive emotional responses from rationality. But the destruction of an innocent man is not justice, but just the opposite. We should be vigilant against criminals of this nature, but we also should try our best to make sure that we don't cause collateral damage. It does nothing to stop real victimizers. I understand, though, that this is much more easily said than done. What this film does is that it shows us how these people react, but it also gets us to empathize with the wrongly accused man. It makes it easy for us to imagine ourselves as the recipients of this injustice. There's a line in the movie in which Brun, Marcus's godfather, says that the hunt turns boys into men and men into boys. That's true, but not necessarily of the deer hunting. The witch hunt of Lucas proves who is strong of character and who is not. Brune stands by Lucas's side the whole time, and Theo, to his credit, later realizes his innocence. The other men in the town reduce themselves to brutes and animals. It's interesting that this film was released in 2012, as in the years following the movie, we saw the rise of the Me Too movement and cancel culture. Sure, plenty of slimy Hollywood people got what was coming to them, but how many of the people accused were innocent? How many lives were ruined as a result of online hysteria? How many of us participated in the cancellations despite not knowing much or any of the evidence, but yet we still engaged in some kind of emotional knee-jerk reaction? It's much easier to be in the mob than against it. And you know what? Once an evil thought comes into our heads about someone, once those words are spoken and we receive them, those words aren't going back and they're hard to erase. Even if someone wins in a court of law, such as Johnny Depp or recently Armie Hammer, it's hard for many of us to shake our assumptions about them. It feels to me like the hunt was setting the stage for the coming decade. It serves as a microcosm for all of society, and it just illustrates so well how fragile even the best communities are. Watch this film. If you've seen it, then watch it again. It's a hard film to watch, I know, but I think The Hunt is one of the most important films of this millennium. It's a film that forces you to look into your own soul and question who you are and who you would be in this scenario. For the next few movies, I'm running on the assumption that most of you probably haven't seen them, as they aren't that popular. I'm going to keep the rest of the video rather spoiler-free, and just tell you about these films and why I think you should watch them. Hopefully, you like some of these more obscure Mikkelsen kinos. I know the last chapter of the video was about some pretty heavy stuff, so let's lighten the mood a little bit and talk about Nicholas Winding Refn's sophomore feature film, Bleeder, a movie about a guy going violently crazy because his girlfriend is pregnant. Hey now, I was not being sarcastic with that last statement, but I did only say a little bit. Though, to be fair, not many movies are as heavy as The Hunt. Bleeder is a movie that feels like two interconnected films. On the one hand, it's about Leo, a working class guy who lives with his girlfriend. They find out that she's pregnant at the beginning of the movie, and all the pressures of the world, the pressures of becoming a new dad, weigh down on him. These pressures send him on a deadly downward spiral. On the other hand, the film is about Lenny, a lonely video store clerk who falls in love with Leia, a woman who works at a cafe nearby. He's a bit of a shut-in and doesn't have much experience with talking to people, as he just watches 4 movies a day. To be frank with you guys, Lenny is the real literally me character for all of us. He's a socially awkward cinephile who has major trouble talking to girls and whose friends get annoyed at him for only ever talking about films. He can list off just about every film director, but he's at a loss for words when he wants to talk to a girl. Just look at how he walks away from Leia after trying to talk to her, but it becomes awkward. So me. Funny thing about this character is that it's basically a self-insert for Refn. In the original script, Lenny was really cool, but it was Mads that told Refn that the character needed to not be cool because Refn himself isn't as cool as he thinks. So, in this film, Mikkelsen is basically doing an impression of how Refn acts, as opposed to how Refn thinks he acts. I'd say that Bleeder is a must-watch for anyone who likes Refn's early style. This film is, despite being 2 intertwined narratives, pretty tight and focused. It's not as gritty as the Pusher films, and it's got some visual stylings and flourishes that show a young Refn experimenting with the medium. Bleeder also feels like Refn's most Tarantino-esque film, but maybe that's just because of all the conversations surrounding films within this movie. Bleeder is a bit hard to find right now, but I'm sure that all of you will be able to find it. I hope that this film, along with the Pusher trilogy, gets a new restoration and an American release soon. Have you ever wanted to see Mads Mikkelsen play as a Norse god? Well, in Valhalla Rising, he's One Eye, which, for those of you unfamiliar with Norse mythology, is another name for Odin.
Who are you?
He's a silent warrior, enslaved by a group of people in Scotland circa 1000 AD and forced to fight for sport. But, as one man warns, he's never been under the control of anyone for more than 5 years, and his time with these people is running out.
He's never belonged to anyone for more than 5 years. Your time has passed.
He escapes, brutally killing his captors, and sets out to wander the Scottish Highlands with a young boy in tow. It's kind of like a Norse version of Lone Wolf and Cub. They happen upon a group of warriors and religious zealots who aim to sail to Jerusalem to retake the Holy Land. They see how One-Eye is a great warrior and they bring him along to help them fight for their cause, but he only brings them bad luck. They find themselves in the medieval sea version of Silent Hill, meaning that they can't see where the hell they're going because a thick fog descends on them for the entire time. When they do hit land, it's somewhere strange. It's not Jerusalem. Is it the New World, or is it hell? The film examines the death of the old gods and the rise of Christendom, with all the clashing and friction that happened as a result of it. I find it interesting that the Crusaders adopt One-Eye into their group, just as early and medieval Christians adopted some pagan traditions, such as celebrating Christian holidays on pre-existing pagan holidays. Yet their acceptance of him arguably leads them all to their doom. Don't go into this movie expecting a typical medieval action movie. Valhalla Rising is more of a psychedelic fever dream of one. It's also fairly slow-paced but accented by brutal, visceral violence. In a way, it marks a turn in Refn's career, as throughout the 90s and most of the 2000s, Refn focused on making gritty crime dramas like Pusher or like Bleeder. But Valhalla Rising is more of an aesthetically driven, rather than story-driven film. There isn't much dialogue in the movie, and Mads never says a word. It's a movie that is mostly about its overall ominous atmosphere, and about how Mads Mikkelsen can be a badass. This is also Refn's first film completely shot on digital cinema cameras. I can imagine that it would have been pretty difficult to get film processed when he was shooting most of the movie in remote locations in the Scottish Highlands. I've gotta say, he makes use of the Highlands quite well. The film is full of these wide, beautiful landscape shots, grounding all the characters directly to the earth. Yet, he often shoots One-Eye with low-angle shots, making him feel like a god on screen. Adding to that, Refn mixes in One-Eye's visions into the film, shots that are soaked in red. Of course they're soaked in red. This is Refn we're talking about. Valhalla Rising would make a good, weird B-movie to the Northmen if you ever just want to drink mead out of horns with the boys and have a Friday movie night. Last, but certainly not least, is Riders of Justice. This film came out around the same time as Another Round, but it didn't make a huge splash in the States. I only found out about it because some critics I followed recommended it, but I didn't see anyone else on social media discussing it. I decided to check it out, and you know what? I was pleasantly surprised. Here's the basic rundown. Marcus, played by Mads Mikkelsen, is a soldier deployed in the Middle East. His wife and daughter live back in Denmark, and on an excursion to the city, their train gets into a terrible accident and his wife dies. He comes back home for a funeral and to take care of his daughter. But shortly after he arrives home, Otto, another man who is on the train, approaches him and tells him that his wife's death was no accident. Upon hearing this news, Marcus sets himself on a quest for revenge. He brings on Otto and his team of hackers to find out any information they can on the culprits of the attack, the infamous biker gang, Riders of Justice. Their crusade against these gang members takes them down a dark and bloody path. Revenge plots are always fun in movies, but Riders of Justice isn't just a straight-up, super serious action film. It's got a good bit of humor that brings levity to much of the film's darker themes.
En ordentlig tår. Og så er det isen. Så bare gå til isen. Og spis masser.
And the themes it explores are numerous. Chance, coincidence, PTSD, faith, childhood trauma, the nature of violence, human trafficking, crime, and family. One of the more fascinating things about this movie is how it explores coincidence and causality. A stolen bike sets into motion the cascade of events that occur in the story. The characters analyze everything that has happened to try to predict what might happen in the future and to try to make sense of it all. Its exploration of this also brings into light ideas of purpose, fate, and faith. But at its heart, Riders of Justice is a film about overcoming grief and building a family. The main emotional arc is between Marcus and his daughter Matilda. They both struggle to cope with a death in different ways, and it doesn't help that Marcus doesn't know how to be a dad as he's been deployed for so long. So as he's grieving for his wife, he's also a soldier who's trying to reintegrate back into civilian life. Marcus's revenge plot adds more people into his family. Otto, the more normal coder with a sad past. Leonard, a loudmouth hacker who still suffers from extreme PTSD from childhood trauma. And Emmet, a fat coder with anger issues who really, and I mean really, wants to kill those bikers. They form a gang of misfits, intent on bringing justice to the criminal organization that caused a needless loss of life. But along the way, they form bonds with each other and find happiness in their camaraderie. And weirdly, this mission brings Marcus closer to his daughter. I guess those Danes don't think that revenge is all that bad. It's a very dark and pretty violent feel-good movie. Overall, it's a fun watch that should be viewed and appreciated by more people. This movie's easy to find, so you have no excuse not to watch it. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you haven't seen some of the movies I covered here, I encourage you to go watch them. From these films alone, Mikkelsen's immense range as an actor is clear. He can be a Norse god, a drunk teacher, a methodical soldier, a persecuted man, or an introverted cinephile. He's one of the more talented actors working today. Some might say that he's the Ryan Gosling of Europe, but above all, he's literally me. If you want to hear me talk more at length about Another Round, I went onto the MK Ultra Money podcast to discuss it. When that video is up, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. I've been the Kino Corner, and I will see you all in the next video.